brothers and sisters, before Great Lent, the Holy Church gives us some pictures of the love of God. And 2 Sundays before, there were pictures of love that we can understand easily. Well, first of all, the parable of the publican and the Pharisee, and then last Sunday, the especially wonderful story of the love and mercy of God in the parable of the prodigal son. And now, I put it to you that today's story of the Last Judgment is another component of God's love. It's another message of God's love to us. Yes, indeed. The love of God. How are we to understand what it means? You know, there are two very incorrect perceptions of God. Both of them distorted. The first one sees God, and when people hear that God is love, they imagine God as a kind of a Santa Claus that always, no matter what you do, he's always pat you on the head. Okay? That's one distorted picture. The other one is, of course, generated by stories, especially like today's gospel story. The story of the Last Judgment, or the Dread Judgment, as we hear in the Orthodox terminology. And those sort of things make people conjure up a picture of God who's a torturer, a tormentor, an ogre. Now, any serious person would not want either, someone as superficial as Santa Claus, or someone who is a tormentor, a torturer. So this is the reason, because of those distortions, that many people have been leaving the church, and especially in the West first of all, but now it's touched us too, in a powerful way, because we're not exempt from that. We live in the same culture, the same civilization, and we are affected by those distorted pictures, perceptions. So orthodoxy is always a picture right down the golden middle path, right? And so we need to come up with a proper orthodox perception of what the love of God means. The love generally, what it means. Because in the story, of course, God expects us to reciprocate His love. And that's the deciding factor. Those people who have love inside, they want to be with God. And those who don't have love, they have separated themselves from God. They become the goats rather than sheep. But love wants to do anything for the loved one, for the beloved. And God is willing to do anything to save us. And among these things, He presents to us this picture, a scary picture of the possible choice, the choice that we make. All right? Just to illustrate the story of, by a little story from a Russian professor of theology and very popular speaker, Professor Osipov. He said that an alien visiting Earth would be shocked by the behavior of a doctor who in one case prescribes a holiday for a person to rest, and another sends him off to be operated on, with knives and things, not understanding what it means. Well, he says the love of God is a bit like that. God's love wants to save us. In some cases, we need that TLC, tender loving care. In another case, we need surgery Okay, and that's love too, because it saves. Now, and in the final count, a person cannot understand God correctly if we do not understand ourselves. If we don't have any knowledge of ourselves, we cannot understand God properly either. Now, there are wonderful words from St. Gregory of Nyssa, the younger brother of St. Basil, who says, "Show me your man, and I'll show you my God." All right? And it speaks volumes about our self-knowledge opening up to us the knowledge of God. Now, our vision of God is going to be distorted if we don't have a correct understanding of these things: love, freedom, and responsibility. So where's the way out? What's the way out? How can we learn these things? And today's reading is a reminder precisely of these three things: love, freedom, and responsibility. All right? Now, we have to learn to remember about our mortality, to remember that every day that we're going to die. And that will help us to remember about God as well. Okay? And this is the way that the Holy Fathers exercised every day to develop this memory of God and real prayer, real connection. That's what prayer is. It's a connect with God. Right? I recently heard a very fascinating interview as I was driving on radio, and it was an interview with an American executioner. And strangely enough, this guy was a Christian. He's a black Christian. And he decided that nobody would want to do this thing, to execute people. So he volunteered for that, and he worked for a number of years, and he actually executed 62 people. But he made an interesting observation. He said, "I prayed for every one of them as they were on the death row." And he said, because in America sometimes people spend years on the death row, he said, none of these people were monsters. They were like lambs, because they had the constant memory of their own death before them every day. And that brought them to a state which is beyond all the superficial rubbish that we pile up upon ourselves. And the memory of death brings the memory of God. And God who's inside of us. We begin to perceive that there is a real beauty and life within us that comes from somewhere else, comes from God. That's what it is. And if we don't do that, we'll be in denial. We'll be saying, when we're young, it's hard to believe that you're ever going to die. I understand. But as we get older, we want to deny it. Oh no, it happens to other people, not me. Okay? So let's not kid ourselves. Let's be realistic. And you know what? It brings not depression. No, it brings happiness. Because how could St. Paul have said, rejoice, always rejoice? And the Holy Fathers, they all remembered about their mortality, and they had joy of the resurrection every day. Saint Seraphim, he'd greet everyone. Christ is risen, he would say to every person, every day. Okay? That comes from a real perception of the inner life and connection, ultimate connection with God. Amen.